In today's video I'm going to show you how to put the overlay on the whip that we've been making. I'm giving you a close-up here on the lengths of the different strands. These are the length of the strands that we'll actually be cutting, and then here these are where we'll be knotting and folding in half, and it's very similar to the previous layers. Today we're actually going to be dropping on the inside rather than the outside, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm probably not going to cover everything because a lot of it has already been covered in the previous videos. This table here also shows you where we want these strands to drop out, and if you want to know how I worked out these distances and stuff, you can go back and look at the theory video. This one is a little bit different. Something to note here are first 4 strands, or the last 4 strands to get dropped out, are all dropping out at the same distance. They're dropping out at this end of the whip, which is why these aren't all the same length on here. Don't forget as well, our last segment is 10 inches long, so this distance here is greater than the other drops. So all these drops are 4.5 inches, but this drop here, there's 10 inches difference in between, and that also affects the length of our strands. So we're going to have 4 strands which are the same length, which is 245 inches, and they'll be folded at these distances here. And then we're going to have 4 strands which are different lengths, but they'll all finish up around the same length and dropping out at 84 inches. So when you've gutted your cord today, keep hold of some of the gutted strands, and there's a couple of bits and pieces here which are going to help us drop out more neatly and just make it a bit easier for me to show stuff on video. I don't use all of this stuff when I'm actually making whips, but it really helps when you're first starting out to be able to make those drops neatly and to not have to have as much dexterity and hold on to as many things when you're working. One of those things is here. So this is just a split ring on a piece of string. You can use any ring, just so long as it's nice and smooth. It can let cord run through it. And the other thing is this: I use a clamp, but I'm just essentially going to be using it as a bit of a weight. And you can tie on anything you like. I just like this because it will clip on to the strands, and I'll show you how I use those right now. So I'll go over to the whip. I'm going to show you how to do a couple of different drops which you'll be doing while making the whip, but I'm not going to do every single drop today as well. I'm going to work up until the point at which we put on the fall, and then I'm going to do making and putting on the fall in a slightly different video. Before we get to the plaiting, I just thought I'd show you a quick shot of the core and the bellies that we've got already made up. So this has been rolled. I've done both the transitions, and I'll just take you down now. You can see here is the second transition. Remember, this is the solid, which has 2 layers on it. This is 2 layers of diamond here, and then this is a single layer of diamond just there. And then down at the bottom I've bound everything, melted it together, and cut off all the knots. I'm here now at where I'm going to make the first drop, which is at 25.5 inches. Remember, on the actual whip we want it to drop out at 24.5, but we've got that extra inch on the end, which we'll chop off at the very end. So just before I do drop, I'm going to drop this one, which is the shortest strand. I've prepared all these the same way as we have with the belly and with the previous 2 bellies. So that's with our shortest strands alternating on either side. So this is the one which we want to go, and I'm going to drop it from the top, but this time around we're going to drop it to the inside, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that now. First things first, I am going to use the split ring which I showed you before, and I'm just going to tie that a little bit further down the whip. Now this isn't going to stay on, this is just to help hold the strands in place while we're dropping this strand. You don't have to do this bit. I usually do this just with my fingers, but this will make it a little bit easier for your first time round. So I've just literally tied that on like it was a shoelace or something. Now what I'm going to do, this is the next one to come in, So I'm going to come in between our two groups. So we've got 16 strand going on this time, so we have 4 groups of 4, bottom, top, bottom and top, and we're going in between. So I'm going to grab it as if I'm going to plait it. I'm going to pull it tight, and then I'm going to bring it back through. Now the other thing I'm going to do this time is to mark the last visible sort of portion of this strand as it comes in. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of the inside core, and I'm just going to lay it underneath that strand there. Now, as we've already pulled this one tight, we don't need to pull it tight again, but this time I'm just going to feed it underneath. So instead of coming up through here, it's just going to go straight underneath, making sure that it's laying nice and flat. I'm then going to pass it through that ring, and you can either tie something onto it, or I like to use a stall clip like this. I'm just going to attach it onto the bottom like that. So then this strand is now being held underneath in line with everything else, and we have this here. Now what this does is it marks where the last position where this disappeared, but it also means that once we've plaited over this, we've got something to be able to pull that strand back out a little bit again should we pull too hard and it gets pulled under the following strand. So to do a top drop, it's similar to what we did before. So I've pulled this one and then put it in line, and now we're going to take the next strand from the same side. I'm going to come in between these 4 and these 4, and we're just going to plait as if that one wasn't there. So I'm going to pull that one, come over the top and lay it into place. Now, this is getting a little bit fiddly, what with the camera and everything in the way, but hopefully you can see what's going on. So now I'm just going to carry on plaiting, but this side here is now 4 on the bottom and 3 on the top. So when I come through, I'm going under 3 over 4. So that's the next strand to come over. I'm going to go under 3 over 4, same as before. Wipe it down, pull it tight and lay it in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on plaiting for a little bit, because I want this nicely held in place before I completely chop this one off and lay it under everything. So next one is here, under 4 over 4. And what this stall clamp does is it just puts even tension on this strand the whole time, and it's holding it against the belly nice and flat. Under 3 over 4. And then again. Under 4 over 4. You can see we have this strand here, this piece of the inner, it's just trapped under the last place where the strand we're dropping now disappears. And I'll show you that in a little bit more detail once I come to setting that one properly and making sure that it's in place. But what I want to do before that is just plait a little bit further down, so that these strands, which are getting tight as we're plaiting, have gone past that point and they're all set in place, and then we can set the tension on this strand. So I'll just keep doing a little bit further down. Now this will create, where we drop this strand off, because we end up taking two from the same side, it will create a double strand where we've dropped this one out. Now there are ways of hiding that, but it doesn't really affect things, especially on a whip like this where all the colours are the same. You really won't notice it, and it won't affect the action of the whip at all. If there's enough interest, I'll come back and I'll show how you can hide these drops completely. But dropping in singles, you will be a little bit limited on the kind of patterns that you can do perfectly. But the reason I do it like this is because I find it makes a very nice smooth taper on the whip. So I'm just going to come maybe a couple more plaits now. This is a good point as well, before you cut off the strand that you're dropping, just make sure underneath here, just go along and check everything and make sure you haven't got any twisted strands, anything out of place, because before you cut is the time to check these things. Once it's done, it's a little bit more difficult. Okay, so I'll turn this over to the side now and take a little look at this. So you can see here, now that these strands underneath it are starting to tighten up, this is when we want to set this to have the right tension and make sure that it's not being sucked under this strand here. So I can use this thread here to kind of pull back a little bit if I need to, and then I can pull on the end here, and that seems about right at the moment. You can see there are two strands coming under in our pattern here, but that is one of the disadvantages of using this technique. If you drop in doubles, you don't have this problem, but you do have other problems. Okay, so what I'm going to do is reset up the camera and show you what I'm going to do when I clip off this strand here. So I'm about to cut off this strand here. This is the one that we've laid in, and I've been using the inner we used to mark to set my tension and make sure that's set in nice and tight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow on from where it comes out from underneath of the plaiting. I'm going to push it along here like this, and then my next drop I want to happen here. So just behind that, I'm going to place my thumb. So my thumb is now about ½ inch back from where we want our next drop. I'm going to cut off here. I'm going to pull this down so that it's away from the main body of the whip, and then I can come in with a lighter like so, melt the end a little bit, and then I'm just going to squish that in. Now this is just to hold it while we're plaiting, but it keeps our tension from before, and it holds this strand in place while we plait over it. And I'm going to plait on until we get to the next drop, which will be a bottom drop, which is a little bit easier. So I'll see you when we're ready to do that one. I'm here at the next drop, and it's going to be this one, which is our next shortest one. So it's on the left hand side, and we're going to drop from the bottom this time round. So this is the next one to come over, and this time I'm just going to plait it like normal. I've tied on the ring down here, and I've pulled out the marker from before, just so that it doesn't get caught in the thing and change the tension on that strand which we just laid in. But that's all now being held nicely by the plaiting over the top of it. So I'm going to come in here. This side, remember, is under 3/4. So I'm going to do that again, under 3/4. This time around though, we're actually going to plait it. I've had to come a little bit further than I would have wanted to. I'm going to be dropping this one at about 30.5 inches. Ideally I'd want to drop it at 30, but you can see my window is either here or here, so I've chosen to come here. Okay, so under 3 and over 4, making sure that this one is nicely laid flat. Put our tension on and lay it over. Now, just before we do anything else, this is the last visible place where this strand is going to go in. So again, I'm going to put my marker into place. And now I'm just going to, just to hold this one in place while we work with it, I'm going to plait one more over the top of it. So this time I'm going to come from this side, and we're going to come under 4 over 4 again. Okay. Now we're going to take this strand, this is the one that we want to drop, and again I'm just going to feed it through that ring. And I'm going to clip my weight to it. Doesn't have to be a lot of weight at all, it's just something to take the slack out and hold it nicely in place. And now I'm just going to keep on plaiting over the top of that for a little bit. I'm kind of holding it with my finger here just to stop it from slipping around too much. I want that held in place by the other strands. And these might get in the way a little bit, so we'll just lay them up that way. So, same as before. Coming under 3 over 4 on that side. And now we're going to start to ignore this strand here, the one that we're dropping out. So this time around it's like we've got under 4 over 3 on this side, because we're not counting that strand we've just dropped out. So it'll be this one here. We're going to come under 4 over 3. I apologise for knocking the camera. This is quite difficult to do with the tripod and a camera and a light. Oh dear. Okay, and then on this side, oh yeah, under 4 over 3. Nope, under 3 over 4. And that's it really. I'm going to keep on plaiting, same as before, until I get a bit further down, everything's kind of held in place. I then have this, which I can use to pull back if I need to, and the strand underneath. I've plaited down a little bit further, and as you can see, these strands below where we dropped out are getting nice and tight now. And now it's time to set the tension on this one. You might be able to pick it up on the video, I'm not sure if you can, but this strand is not sitting, the one that we dropped out is not sitting as tight as the rest. I haven't cut it off yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our marker here and just hold onto it there, just to make sure that I can get the tension right without it being sucked under this strand here. So I just want a little bit more just to get it to sit in nicely like the rest of them. And that's all I need really, just that to sit in, just like so. Then I can remove that marker, and I'm going to clip off down the bottom in the same way as I did before. Now all the drops are going to be similar to that, going down. They're either going to be a top drop or a bottom drop. So we're going to alternate our drops on either side. So if you've done top drop first on here, the next one on this side will be a bottom drop. So it'll go top, bottom, bottom, top. Hope that's clear. Right. The only drop which is going to be different is when we get down the other end, and when we drop from 5 to 4, that's going to be slightly different. So I'll join you there and show you how I do that one. Okay, I've actually stopped just before I'm about to drop strand number 8. And the reason I've done that is I figured this is a good time to introduce some theory and explain a little bit about what's going on inside the whip when we're dropping from the different places. So this is a representation, like a cross section of our whip, when we're in 16 plait. these sort of crosses represent where the seams are. And so what we do when we drop out a strand and we go into 15 plait, what happens, we take out one, so let's take out that one there, and then that puts us into 15 plait. Now at this point you can see here we have one side which is shorter than all the other three, so this is the outside strand and this is what it's running over. So this one here is now running over 1, 2, 3 strands, whereas everything else is running over 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have two options when we drop the next strand. We can either drop from the top again, so we could drop from here and that would make these two opposing sides here the same, or we can drop from the bottom on the opposite side. And that's what I like to do. Well, it'll probably be that one. That's what I like to do. The only reason I like to do that, it doesn't really bear any effect on the whip itself, other than making, because these are on opposite sides, then it makes it a little bit more difficult for people to see and follow where you've dropped the strand out. So that's what we've been doing so far. So we've dropped out one, we're now in 15 plait. If we drop out this one, we're in 14 plait. If we drop out another one, we're in 13. And then when we drop out our last one here, we're now in 12 plait, and as you can see, this means that there is now 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 under our outside strands. Now, like I say, it's not going to have a huge amount of difference if you dropped sort of top, bottom, bottom. It wouldn't make a huge amount of difference, because essentially our whip is working usually only in 2 directions, up and down. Like I say, I do it like this to hide it. Now, what relevance does that have? The reason why I've stopped at plait number 8, I'm going to bring in our graph here. So what I've done here is just put in a representation of what I've been doing. So strand number 16 was a top drop, and then we had a bottom drop, a top drop. And at this point here, when it's a stable pattern, essentially we can choose whatever we want to do. So that could be bottom, top, bottom. So long as they oppose what sides they're dropping on, it doesn't really matter. But when we come down here to number 8, I've actually changed what I'm doing, because when we get to strand number 5, it's going to be a lot easier for us to have that as a bottom drop. The reason being, you've probably noticed as you've been plaiting along, that every time we do a top drop, it leaves that double strand. And on this last one here, we've got a lot less material, we've got a lot less distance that the strands are covering. And so by doing this as a bottom drop where we don't have that double strand, it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to hide that drop and make it neater. Okay, so I'm going to go back to plaiting now, and I will join you at the drop number 5. I'm actually here at drop number 8 at the moment, so I'm going to come down to drop number 5 and I'll show you how I do that, because the way I lay that one in is ever so slightly different from the ones we've done previously. Here now at the drop from 5 to 4, and this is actually the most difficult drop in the entire whip. If you imagine at the top end, when we drop out, we're only losing 1/16 of our area of coverage over the inner strands. This time round, when we drop out, we're going to lose 1/5 of our coverage, so it becomes quite important to do this neatly, and it's a bit difficult to do. Now I'm going to do this slightly differently, and I'm going to do it in a similar way to the way that I do the core, in that I'm going to take the strand that we're going to drop in and I'm going to put it inside of our core strand here for 1 segment length. Remember, we're going in 4 strand now for 10 inches, and that means that we'll even though our pattern is going to remain the same on the outside, it means we'll still be dropping a strand on the inside, so we'll continue our taper and continue dropping off our mass and stiffness right to the end of the whip. So before I do it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make sure that everything's nice and tight. So I'm going to pull on every single strand and try and get this as tight as possible so that we know exactly where things are going to drop in. So this is the strand that's going to come out. This is our last one. And as I said before, this is going to be a bottom drop, just to make it as easy as possible, and so we don't end up with a double strand close to the end of the whip here. So just like normal, I'm going to take it underneath, make sure it's lying flat, pull it round, pull it tight, and then put it into place. I'm also going to take my piece of marker string and I'm going to place that underneath in the last place that it went over. So this is the last time you'll see this strand outside on the whip. So let's pull that into place. And again, just make sure everything's nice and tight before we do this. We're going to carry on plaiting on, so it will get tightened up even more than I'm doing just now. But this is just to make sure that everything's kind of in place. Because what I want to do now is, like we did with the core, I'm going to measure out 5 inches. I'm going to come inside of the core strand here, and I'm going to pop out right here, just where we are. Now don't worry, the next strand will come over and cover up that drop. I'm going to pull all the way through, and I'm not going to clip off that strand until I've plaited a bit further down, for the same reason as before. Between that and the end, which we'll have poking out, it will give me some control to reset this strand if it doesn't go in quite as nicely as I want it to. Okay, so I've taken off tension off the whip, so it's hanging loose now, and that allows me to compress this strand here, the core strand. I'm going to take my ruler, and like before, I'm going to measure 5 inches away, because remember, we want to drop it off at 4.5 inches, which is 1 segment length, but we'll be chopping off a little bit off the end. So like before, can you see this? Yeah, you can see this. I do apologise if my camera's wobbling a little bit. It's actually a 3D printed camera stand, and as soon as my lathe is up and running, I'll be machining one out of metal, but that kind of has to wait for now. I'll get these videos up for you. Okay, so I've made my hole here. Don't know if yeah, you can't see that. Cool. And then I'm going to come in with my lacing needle into that hole, and I'm going to work it up on the inside there to just where I want that strand to drop out. So let's just double check that, pull everything tight, make sure I'm coming into the right place. I think I want to come ever so slightly further, maybe just a couple of millimeters. A little bit too far maybe. A little bit too far. Come back ever so slightly. There we go, and you can see the end of my needle there. It's sitting exactly where I want this strand to drop out. So now I'm just going to work the end of the needle through the side wall, just like so. Now I'm going to take this strand as it's sitting just there. I'm going to pull all the way along, because what I don't want is twist in this. Well, I showed you before how to twist out if you do get some. And then I'm just going to place that through my needle. Let's have a little bit more at the end there. Put it right to the end. Sure it's there. I'm going to snip it off. and then melt in to form a nice smooth bead. Just like so. I'm not going to touch it for a second or two, just let it harden up. There we go. Now that's quite a big bead, so that might give me some trouble, but I'll give it a go anyway. If you do discover that for some reason it hasn't gone in quite nicely, you can always, we've got plenty here, so you can always take it off, redo that section, but I'll give it a go with this big lump in. It should be okay. So now what I'm going to do is pull it along. I'm going to compress this outer strand, and I'm just going to work the outer sleeve over that strand. And you can see here it is giving me a little bit of trouble, but it'll come. We'll just keep working it. So now I'm just going to, I've got to the other end, so I just need to work the end through like so. And then I'm going to pull this through. There we go. So I'm going to pull that tight. And you can see here how that's just sitting in straight underneath like that. So now I'm going to carry on plaiting, and I'll show you what that looks like when I do. Turn your phone off, Charlie. Just make sure everything's nice and tight, and then I'm going to carry on plaiting. But between this loop and the end here, it means I've got some control to be able to set that a little bit nicer. It may be that if you just can't get it set right, that this hole is in the wrong place, and then you might have to come back and do this again. But so long as you notice that before you've snipped off this one, you've got the ability to do that. So let's just plait on a little bit. So we're going from 5 to 4 now, so this is the next strand from the other side. So I'm going to come under here, plaiting nice and tightly. And we're just going to keep plaiting on. I'll just do a few plaits on here. Apologies, the SD card just filled up at the critical moment, as it usually wants to. Yeah, so I'm just going to plait on a little bit further. You can see here I'm sort of bracing against the side of the whip here, just to make sure everything's going in nice and tight. So I'm going to carry on plaiting on. You can see here that strand's gone in really nice just there. And as I carry on plaiting, this part here will get tighter as these strands are laid into place. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm confident that that's going to come in nicely. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to pull back the outer sleeve ever so slightly. You can see there, it's just immediately being pulled back inside. So we just want to make sure that the core is sitting nice and straight. No wrinkles. And then I'm just going to put just enough tension to hold the weight and hold the whip up straight to put it back to a nice working height for me. I'm going to plait on for another 10 inches, and I think I'm actually going to end the video here, because next up we need to make the fall before we can finish the whip. These whip videos are getting quite long, so I'm going to finish this video here, and I'll do the fall and the hitch knot in a separate video, the next one. I really hope this is helping you. I hope that it's clear enough. Feel free to leave comments, ask me questions, advice if you feel you're a better whip maker, that would be great. Yeah, leave a like if you like it, don't if you don't. See you next time.